On the boundary between the Staffordshire Moorlands and Derbyshire Dales is the Peak District's most iconic river, the Dove.
Near the village of Hartington, the infant River Dove flows into the first of a series of spectacular limestone dales. This is Beresford Dale, a scene of perfect tranquillity that was to enchant two men who would create one of England's finest sports.
Oh, sir, doubt not but that angling is an art, and an art worth your learning. Those words have been reprinted more times than any other book in the history of the English language, barring, of course, the Bible and the Book of Common Religious Prayer. They were written by a gentleman born in 1593 to an industrial family from Stafford, but who would go on to write some of the great biographies of his age, to become favoured in the court of the king, and to inspire a new sport. Over 350 years ago, the complete angler, or the contemplative man's recreation, was first written down by Izaak Walton.
Walton was in love with the River Dove, and it was on its upper reaches that he befriended Charles Cotton, owner of the Beresford estate. The two became the best of companions and spent many hours learning how to fish along the river's length. Walton said, "God did never make a more calm, quiet, innocent recreation than angling." It was all his love and passion that led to the publication of his magnificent tome, The Complete Angler. First published in 1653, the book continued to be revised throughout Walton's lifetime as he met new people, visited distant rivers, and learnt even more skills in the art of angling. Today, the language and its discursive structure seem archaic and can present a challenge for the modern reader, but its blend of humour, charm, insight and expert tuition more than repays the effort. Walton regarded angling as a communal endeavour, and throughout the book we meet many companions along the way, from farmers and milkmaids to doctors and hostelries as they wander around the riverbanks. One thing that always surprises me on every repeat read is Walton's profound understanding of the environment. In his insights and opinions on the ecosystems fundamental to angling, he was several centuries ahead of his time.
Today, fishermen come to Beresford Dale to carry on Walton's tradition, casting in the glistening evening waters for that elusive trout, even if they don't get a bite. Could you wish a better place? In a secluded spot near to Pike Pool, Cotton's small fishing house still stands, bearing the inscription, "Sacred to Fishermen," above its door. If you use your imagination, you can still smell the embers of the late fire and make out the sounds of the two friends discussing their day's catches within. A beautiful little chocolate brown bird, which would have been a welcome companion to Walton and Cotton beside the Dove, is the dipper, so called because of its habit of bobbing up and down when perched on exposed rocks alongside the river. Highly energetic, patrolling a great length of water, the most busy have been known to make 60 dips a minute. They are also quite exceptional for their ability to feed underwater, staying submerged by using their wings against the current to push down, whilst gripping the stones with their feet. Their dense and well weatherproof feathers help them to stay warm in the water and dry quickly upon emerging. Another characteristic bird of the limestone dales is the grey wagtail. Much more striking than its name, its slate grey upper parts contrast beautifully with its lemon yellow underside. They breed between April and July and build their nests in the crevices and tree roots in the valley side, lining it with delicate mosses from the sheltered banks. Although their range has expanded in the last century, they are not a common species. Usually found in great densities in the high hills, they eat the insects which glide beside the fast-flowing streams and rivers.
Further downriver from Beresford Dale, we reach the quaint hamlet of Millvale.
From here we gain entry to Dovedale, without doubt the most visited and famous dale in the Peak District. It has inspired not only fishermen, but all who have visited have had their heartstrings pulled. Lord Byron wrote of the Dale, "I can assure you there are things in Derbyshire as noble as Greece or Switzerland." Dovedale has such scenery as can be found nowhere else in England. The approach is best made in the evening, when the tourists have left and as the sun begins to sink behind the hills. Most approach from the south, but I truly believe our entry from the north is by far the finest. Passing through flower-rich meadows, the magnificent portal of broken lofty rocks is reached. Rugged in their grandeur, fractured masses of stone intermingle with the ashy woodland. The first sight met is two large natural excavations known as the Dove Holes, which pierce the rock. The largest 60 foot wide but of no great depth. These caves were cut by glacial rivers which scoured away the rock of the gorge to create all we shall see. Passing through the luxuriant foliage, whole rocks seem to rise in perpendicular masses on both sides. On the next meander, Pickering Tor rises to an unseen height, the hillside broken into spiny pinnacles which stand up like fragments of some wide ruin. Whilst on your right, Island Rock, an enormous mass of isolated stone, rises sheer out of the water. The gorge narrows, and emotions of awe and terror in equal measure are inspired by the imposing precipices. Black, bare and frowning by some mighty convulsion of nature, the sides seem to have been rent asunder, while storms of long-forgotten ages have torn and riven the surface. Occasionally large stones are thrown across the cataract, creating a series of fairy cascades which sparkle with peculiar brilliancy. At the sides, gloomy caverns enchant explorers into the heart of the mountain beyond. Frequently grotesque and fanciful faces crest from the rocks. Here a lion seems to have been frozen mid-climb. And further down the dale, appearing like a triumphal arch, Reynard's Cave rises from the ancient screes. William Wordsworth, one of our greatest landscape poets, visited without leaving a verse, though this land stayed with him, for many years later he wrote the following lines about a distant love. "The stars of midnight shall be clear to her, and she shall lean her ear in many a secret place, where rivulets dance their wayward round. She dwelt among the untrodden ways, beside the springs of Dove."
The profusion of wildflowers along the Dove has changed little since Walton's time. Indeed, some very rare plants still cling on to the fragile screes and ancient woodland along its length. This tiny plant, called Hutchinsia, grows on the steep rocks at the entrance to the Dove Holes. It is a winter annual and can flower as early as March. Shortly after flowering, the plant dies back, and if you visited in June, you would not find a trace of its tiny white blooms. A more dramatic white flower grows beside the river, the Star of Bethlehem. Although large, the plant can be quite inconspicuous, for the flowers only open in direct sunlight and close quickly at dusk or when the shade sets in. Another valley rich in wildflowers is Monksdale, a tributary of the River Wye. Amongst its slippery boulders, you can find the Goldilocks buttercup, a clear indicator of ancient woodland. Wood sorrel also grows amongst the mossy stones beside the river. Since at least the 14th century, its lemony tasting leaves have been used to add flavour to salads, green sauces and soups. The leaves and flowers contain mucilage, vitamin C and oxalic acid, and in the past were used in various medicinal preparations to hinder the putrefaction of blood, quench the thirst, strengthen a weak stomach, prevent vomiting and to treat fevers. This is the herb Paris, or true lover's knot. With its whirl of 4 egg-shaped leaves, herb Paris is known as the herb of equality because all of its parts are considered equal and harmonious. This symmetry appealed to medieval herbalists, and herb Paris was used both in marriage rituals and to guard against witches. The 4 broad oval leaves of herb Paris set in a cross are quite distinctive. Rising from the middle, an upright stem bears a flower, a star of 4 narrow yellow-green petals and 4 green sepals, topped by a dark berry and a crown of 8 golden stamens. Paris is a reference to the Trojan prince who in ancient Greek mythology was asked by the god Hermes to give a golden apple to the most beautiful goddess. The 4 leaves represent Paris and the 3 competing goddesses, and the berry growing at the top is the apple. At the top of Monksdale is a dramatic cliff of limestone, and growing from small ledges and cracks in its ancient face are the tiny yellow flowers of spring cinquefoil. This is quite a rare plant with a limited distribution in Britain, but I am happy to say the Peak District is still a stronghold, and in the right spots, such as on this rock, it can trail beautifully in its hundreds. This area is a stronghold for another very rare early flower, the spring sandwort. It grows in its hundreds and thousands a few miles from Monksdale on the spoil of Tideswell Rake, an ancient lead vein which has been excavated and exploited since medieval times. Spring sandwort's delicate appearance can look somewhat out of place against the ravaged environment of the old spoil scars, but this small, tufted perennial groups together into little pockets which form great carpets of the plant.